The topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the hosts and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Welcome to Life with Open Pages. We all have a purpose in life. Sometimes we just need a little motivation to point us in the right direction. This show is designed to help you create the life you were meant to live. I'm your host, Michelle Bannister. My goal is to motivate you to make simple life changes so you can experience a life with meaning, direction, love, and peace. Now let's start the show. Hello and welcome to another episode. I'm Michelle, and tonight we're going to talk about how to stay positive when everything is so negative. You know, today when people are struggling with the past couple of years and all that it's brought about, like isolation and mental health challenges, product shortages, inflation, upheaval in the way that people do their jobs, you know, we all need all the help we can get to stay positive. Pastor Rick McDaniel will deliver inspiration in the form of stories and meditations that will help us to hone in on what's important in life. Please welcome to the show, Pastor Rick McDaniel.
Hi, Michelle. Great to be with you.
I'm so happy to have you. So, Pastor Rick, please tell us about yourself.
Well, I started a church, and for 27 years, I pastored a church in Richmond, Virginia. During that time, I also wrote books and spoke and did other things. And now I am doing that full time. So I write and I speak and I do some media stuff. And it's under High Impact Living. That's the ministry or the organization, High Impact Living. And so I'm excited because it gives me an opportunity, a little freedom to be able to do things like tonight. And I just flew in this morning from traveling this past weekend. So it gives me more freedom since I don't have the responsibility of running a large church.
Oh, that's wonderful. So how did you get into trying to help people to stay positive? You know, today it's so hard because there is so much going on, and you know, you turn the TV on and the first thing you want to do is turn it off because it just doesn't seem like there's anything positive or uplifting for us to watch and enjoy. So how did you get into this?
Well, I was, first of all, I am by nature, and I think an optimistic person. So it's just my nature to be more optimistic. Then when you bring faith into the equation for me, that just brings me to another level of thinking in positive ways. And then it's just my calling in life to encourage, to uplift, to inspire, and motivate people. So I started a church with that kind of focus. My speaking and preaching ministry was that way, and that led into writing. And it's just something that I feel called to do. God put me on this earth to encourage and lift people up.
That's wonderful. That is one. And we need that. We need that so bad. And what's so strange is, you know, so many people these last couple of years have just taken such a toll on them that I don't even think they realize how negative they are. You know, today actually on Facebook, I put a challenge out there that every time you had a negative thought, I wanted you to come up with 2 positive thoughts to replace it. And what was funny was a lot of my readers, they, you know, always like and comment on all my posts. And this one, I think people steered clear of it. And I thought, wow, we're in a scary time. So what do you think about that?
Well, that I'm not surprised, though. Again, that is concerning. It's concerning for sure. That I think that's exactly what's happened. 2 years of pandemic fear and isolation and negativity have taken their toll. And then now look what's happened. Now we have a war in Europe for the first time in 80 years, and so people are just really struggling And I can see people saying, yeah, basically, how can I be positive, Michelle? And I
Right.
can see that response.
Right, right. So tell us about your writing. What do you write about and what do you speak about?
Well, I write in surprise inspirational books. That's what I
Good.
do, is inspirational books. My best-selling book is called Turn Your Setbacks into Comebacks. So I am a guy who, and again, this is what this is all about now. Now we've had this giant setback over the
Mhm.
last 2 years, and now we need to have a comeback. So the setback and the comeback message has been a big one for me for many years. I write a lot of articles, especially for Fox News seems to like a lot of my stuff, and they're very popular. So, but I wrote when Tiger Woods came back and won the Masters, when Tom Brady led the comeback for the Patriots in the Super Bowl over the
Mhm.
Falcons, and things like that. But I write a lot of other inspirational things, and then I have a new book out called This Is Living, which is an inspirational book where you have 100 readings or devotions or meditations, and you read one each day.
Okay, can you share some of that with us?
Yeah. So basically, the idea is to spend about 2.5 or 3 minutes each day, preferably first thing in the morning, before your
Mhm.
mind gets filled with anything else, and read a devotion. And so This Is Living has 100 of those devotions in there. And again, they're 2 pages. They'll take you about 2.5 or 3 minutes, depending on how fast you read, to read them. And the idea is to give you each one of them has a story and a scripture verse, and then some application from me. And the idea is to read them and get your mind right, and get your mindset right before you begin your day.
Okay. Now, a lot of my listeners may or may not understand what a true devotion is.
Okay.
Could you go, kind of explain that a little bit more and maybe give an example?
Sure, sure. Well, I'll give you an example of one that's early in the book. Is I went to Barcelona, Spain, and
Mhm.
went to visit the La Sagrada Familia, the Holy Family Church, and the famous architect Gaudi designed that building.
Mhm.
And what is so incredible about it is it's been in construction for over 140 years.
Wow.
Yeah, it's an amazing building, and but it's amazing that it's still not done. The inside is completed. The goal is to have it done by 2026, which would be the 100th anniversary of Gaudi's death. So I tell that story, like I
Mhm.
just told you, a little more detail. And then there's a scripture verse in the Bible that says that God has begun a good work in us, and he will bring it to completion. So a devotion then would be the story about the church and how it's been in process for over 140 years. We're all in process. We're all a work in progress. And God is working in our lives. And so sometimes we get frustrated by
Mhm.
maybe the lack of progress, why things aren't finished yet. But look at this church. It is like no other church. And believe me, I've traveled all around the world, 6 continents, many countries. I've seen all kinds of churches. This church, there's nothing like it anywhere in the world. It's a masterpiece, but it's
Wow.
still not completed. So if you read a devotion like that, and then you can enter the day thinking, I'm a work in progress. I don't have to get everything completed today. Everything doesn't have to be sewn up and tied up in a nice little bow. I just need to make progress.
That's a great example. And I've seen pictures of that church, but of course, I've never been there.
Yeah.
And yes, we are a work in progress. A lot of people in a couple of different shows, we talked about perfectionism and having to have everything right that first time and being impatient. And all of that kind of falls together and comes together. Um, what would suggest, what kind of suggestions would you make for the listeners that feel that, they have to be a perfectionist? They have to have it done right now. It can't wait, because we all know, I mean, as Christians, it's God's timing, not ours. But man, that's so hard to accept. So how can we identify being positive when it throws us into the negative because we're not doing what we think we should be doing right now?
I think that I'll give you a story. I used to be like the chaplain and the motivational speaker for the Liberty University football team. And one time I came to a game, and they had just lost their first game of the season. They had gone 6-0, and then they lost the game. And that day I gave them a speech in which I said, you can no longer be perfect, but you can still be excellent. So the idea is perfection is impossible in this world.
It is.
But excellence is possible.
Mm.
And so we work on just doing the best job that we can do, becoming the best person that we can become, the best version of us, fulfilling our full potential. I'll give you another devotion that's in the book. Is when I went to Acadia National Park and in Maine, and on Cadillac Mountain is the first place the sun rises in all of America. So I wanted to be there and be the first one to see the sun rise that day in America. So I got up at like 4:00 in the morning, maybe even earlier, and drove up there. And guess what? When I got there, the parking lot was already full.
Oh.
And between the time I was there and the time that the sun rose, probably a couple hundred more people came.
Wow.
And I ended up writing a piece on that for Fox. And then I wrote a devotion about that, because here's the thing. We can't always be first, but we can always be the best that we can be. Right. So that's the same concept is we can't always control the outcome, but we can control the effort that would come from my sports ball playing days. And so I think that's the message is your effort and excellence, that's within your control. Perfection, maybe not. Always winning, always being first, probably not. But sometimes maybe you can. And you never know what might happen if you strive for excellence and give your best effort.
Right. And, we also know that, or I have found that we may not be able to control the outcome, but we can control the way that we respond to it, our attitude from it. I find I go to a lot of baseball games, and they're little league and high school because my grandkids play. And, sometimes it's the coach tells them, oh, everybody's a winner. And I find a lot of our generations, the younger generations right now, everybody has to have a trophy. And when I was growing up, it wasn't that way. If you earned that trophy, you got that trophy. And if you didn't, well, you tried harder next time to try and earn that.
Yes.
Are you seeing a lot of that kind of attitude in the different, say, articles or the counseling or the sermons, the talks and stuff that you do? What are you seeing in that respect?
Well, it's really kind of humorous because I'm really quite outspoken on that particular topic. So I would talk about that and people would laugh. It would create quite a stir in my congregation because as someone who came up in sports and came up in a generation where that was just would be absurd to talk about everyone's a winner and we all get a trophy, that sort of stuff it's not really. I know the intent, where the intent is, but it really isn't. It really ends up not being a very healthy way to raise children, or to really lead in terms of sending a message. Because of course, what happens is you de-incentivize the people who are really striving for excellence. You don't want to do that. You rather raise people up, bring people up, rather than bring down the level of proficiency or execution, or whatever you want to call it. So I am not a fan of the everybody gets a trophy. And I raised a couple of boys who turned out to play college ball, and we raised them with that kind of mentality. It seemed to work out pretty well.
Good. That's great. So let's go back in the beginning. I talked about people struggling over the last couple of years. And I mentioned like isolation, mental health challenges, product shortages. Let's talk a little bit about isolation.
Well, of course, we are created for relationship. Relationship is it's not good for a man to be alone. I mean, that's where it all started. So isolation is just absolutely something that's not healthy for people. And so it's obvious that this pandemic has created something that just by its very nature is just very unhealthy. And it's going to naturally lead to a lot of potential problems. But I do think, and I don't know how deep you want to go in this, Michelle, but I just really believe that at the core of this is a kind of fearfulness that resulted in behaviors that led to lack of mental health, but it finds its source at this idea of I'm going to choose fear over, say, faith.
Okay. Yes. And we all know that fear is false evidence appearing real.
That's it.
But it's real in our minds. And, I know through the isolation process, of course, where I work, we never closed down or anything, but I would watch my friends go into isolation and they stayed home all this time. And I could watch people on Facebook. And it was really kind of interesting because, man, the Lord rose up in the posts and everybody was posting about Psalm 93. And, it was just, wow, so awesome. And now I'm seeing how people are starting to go back to work. They're starting to get back out into, civilization. And those encouraging posts and positive posts are few and far between. So where are we on that?
Yeah, well, that's people. That's people. That again doesn't surprise me. Like your earlier social media experience, I think when people are really feeling it, then they're going to express it. And now, of course, they're finding their way back into actually sort of some degree of normalcy. Although again, with this Ukraine situation in Russia, even though it doesn't directly impact us, it certainly impacts us. And again, some people, especially those prone to fear, can start getting all concerned again about what that might mean and throw them back into a mindset. But what I believe, I actually have a devotion about this in my book where I talk about how fear breeds fear. Fear is a virus. It really is. It just spreads and spreads and spreads, and it's so. It's so debilitating in terms of what it can do to a person. And so you just have to, the only way to deal with fear is to counteract it with faith. You were talking about attitude earlier. So there's the famous Chuck Swindoll quote where life is 10% what happens to me and 90% how I respond to what happens to me. And that's the essence of attitude. You choose every day. We can feel powerless about many things that have happened over the last 2 years, but there's one thing we are not powerless about at all. We are in fact empowered, and that is, what do I choose? I choose faith. I choose not to be fearful. I won't focus on it because that just exaggerates it. That just makes me fear focused instead of faith focused. So that's a choice we have to make. And I would just encourage every listener to choose to fight and resist fear and choose to welcome into your life faith and a positive outlook.
Yes, I totally agree with you there. So many people, all you do is turn the news on and you can just feel the anxiety just raising up and raising up and raising up. And you're watching a program. And, the sad part is we may not even be given the true story or the correct story. We might just be given a partial, piece of the story that's just so dramatic. But just that little piece of the story can raise your anxiety levels so bad that I stopped watching the news for a long time, because they only tell you what you want to hear, or,
Yes.
or think what you want to hear, and
Right.
not really the facts.
Mm-hmm.
So we've all been through that, right?
Yes. Yeah. Somebody was interviewing me about this mental health exact thing we're talking about here, and how people can get so what the news can do to them. And so they asked me, what did I do? And what I did in the very beginning days of the pandemic, that very beginning part, our church was only closed for about 3 months, and then we reopened, and for services, we never stopped having office hours and all the other things. But there was a time there in the beginning when it was really locked down. I decided that I was going to I wanted to fill my mind with like laughter. The Bible talks about how laughter and a happy or merry heart is good medicine. And so I'm a native New Englander, and I had fond memories of the show Cheers, if you remember that show. Cheers, which I hadn't seen in forever. It's been off TV for years, and I discovered that it was, you could watch these reruns, and I began to watch some. And I'm not much of a person who watches a lot of TV. Really not a TV guy, more of a reader, and so it's not really my thing. And sports, I watch sports, but as I told my son's teacher one time, when they said there were no TV watching for a whole week, and I supported that, and then somehow it came out that my son had watched the ball game, and so the teacher said, you didn't follow the no TV, and I told him to tell her, listen, sports is not TV, it's sports, it's different. But anyway, I just started watching some of these Cheers episodes. And I started watching some of the comedians like Jim Gaffigan and Nate Bargatze and some of these comedians. And I just said, I'm going to welcome into my life laughter, happiness, even when it's not happy, rather than to dwell on all these negative things.
Right. Yes. And, when I talked about product shortages, I mean, we all know about the product shortages we had, and the difficulty that brought up. And now, of course, there's an overabundance of certain things where there was a shortage. The next thing that, we're probably facing are gas prices rising. And a lot of people, I talked about people having to change their ways and work from home. A lot of people are starting to go back to work, and I'm hearing the anxiety and the fear of gas prices going way up and people not being able to buy gas and make it to work. What do you feel about that?
Well, again, there are in life always challenges that we face. And so we have to have a mental toughness that allows us to say, listen, there are going to be challenges in life. There are going to be tough times. Tough times never last. Tough people do. So we have to have a kind of mental toughness that allows us to be strong. And here's another story in the book is when I was in Hawaii. I was on the big island of Hawaii that's called Hawaii. We were driving one time, and I saw this sign for the Mauna Loa nut company, and it was like, come, tour our factory or something. And we were on our way somewhere, and I said, I'd like to go back there and do that. So we drove down got off the main road, like 3 miles, going by all these trees, and we end up at this plant and get a little tour and learn about the macadamia nut and how it's the hardest nut in all the world to crack. That the Hawaiians used to drive their cars over these nuts to crack them. The nut actually has like mechanical properties like aluminum. It's just kind of wild. So I wrote a devotion on that about how we need to be like this tough nut, that's hard to crack and delicious once you crack it, but gotta be tough and just make our way. So the gas prices go up, they'll come down. It won't be fun when they're up, but we'll make it through.
Okay, sounds good. Listen, we're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we're going to talk some more about how to be positive when everything around us feels so negative. Do you have a project or service that you want the world to know about? Or would you like to have your business or project highlighted during the show to a wide audience? If you would like to be a guest or sponsor of the show, please contact us at info@openpagespublishing.com. That's info@openpagespublishing.com. Okay, we're back. So I'm talking to Pastor Rick McDaniel about how to stay positive even when everything is kind of negative. We've talked about the last couple of years about shortages and people isolating and different things, and how we need to push forward and have a good attitude and choose to be happy, that we can't let these negative things come inside of us because it's a fear. So Pastor Rick, go ahead and tell us how people can get in touch with you.
Sure. The easiest way is just very simple, rickmcdaniel.com, just rickmcdaniel.com. When you go there, you'll see information about my new book, This is Living. You'll see information about articles that I've written, messages on my YouTube channel that you can watch. Also, I have a show called Daily Devotions with Pastor Rick McDaniel on the Pray app or pray.com. 2:30 each day, Monday through Friday, Eastern time, 11:30 Pacific time, but also on demand. So you could go back and listen to those devotions. So you can listen to them, you can read them in the book. But again, and then other things about, me, and if you want me to come speak or whatever, all that stuff, rickmcdaniel.com is the place to go.
Great. Thank you so much. Now, explain to me how the growth of the giant sequoias show us how we can survive through tough times.
Yeah, that's a great story. So I was out at Yosemite National Park, and the Sequoia Grove is not that far away. So we went to and it had just reopened. It had actually been closed for a couple years. So you're walking around looking at these biggest trees in the world. There's nothing bigger than these trees. Redwoods are taller, but there's nothing bigger and wider. You can drive a vehicle through them easily.
Right.
But there's these markings on the trees. It's undeniable. You're just like, what's going on? And so the ranger told the story that those are actually burn marks. And what he said was that the fire at the brush level actually is healthy for the tree. And because they're so gigantic and the bark is so thick, it's almost impossible for the fire to go all the way up to the top of the tree and actually burn it down. But what ends up happening is the fire burns up the ground around it, which actually kind of creates like a fertilizing effect. But most fascinating is that there are these cones that have the seeds of the sequoia. They can only be opened under intense heat. When it gets so hot, the cones open, the seeds spread out onto the newly burned, fertilized, vegetated ground, and that's how new sequoias come to be and come to life. So I just was listening to this. I'm thinking these trees have been like 2,000 years old. They were like here when Jesus was on the earth, and they're still here, and more of them are growing. And so sometimes we have to go through these intense seasons that are hard, that are hot, that are uncomfortable. But out of that can come new growth. And maybe it can't happen in any other way.
That's interesting. I saw those trees. My mom took me up there one year. Incredible. I
Yeah.
mean, the biggest things you could possibly imagine, big as round as, I don't even know, probably my house. I
Yes.
mean, just absolutely impressive. I didn't take a tour, but I would have loved to have heard that, because that's very true. You know, what doesn't break us grows us.
Yes.
And so it is interesting that you would take that analogy, because it's very true. They say that you won't go through more than, what God wants you to go through. He won't give you more than you can handle, kind of thing. But, I tell you, sometimes in those valleys, man, it's pushing it.
Yes. Yes.
And
Yeah.
I think,
It's stretching. It's
yeah,
stretching you.
and I think these last 2 years are really what, I mean, it stretched a lot of people. Unfortunately, it held a lot of people back.
Yes.
And now they're kind of, starting to get out a little bit and explore. But I still see a lot of people that, don't want to get in crowds. And they're still, you can just tell the fear is just overwhelming.
Yeah. Yes. It's really concerning for somebody like me. And again, it's another reason why I wanted to get this book out, and was so happy that the publisher got it out a little bit faster than most books, because I want people to really have a daily message that will encourage them, challenge them, motivate them, inspire them to just not give in to fear, not give in to this kind of negativity that just seems to surround us. Because again, even in the most difficult and hard situations, good things come out of it. And I've done a couple of, that's, by the way, I didn't mention my podcast. It's called Point of Impact, and that's also at rickmcdaniel.com, but Point of Impact. And I did episodes where I tried to highlight during the pandemic, here's some positive things, here's some good things that are coming out of this, and here's some things that are never going to change no matter what takes place. And so all those things are true. So we just have to, it's all about reorienting our mind to think differently. And what you look for, you will see. Like if you buy a new car, and you're driving down the road, and all of a sudden you're like, hey, that's my car. Oh, in black, because I bought a white one. And then, oh, that's my car in silver. Or, oh, that's my car, and it has different rims on the tires. And you're like, wow, I didn't know my car looked up. Well, here's the thing. The cars have been passing you by. Those cars have been there, but you never noticed them, because you didn't care about that car until you bought that car, that model. And now that you own that model, now you see it because you are looking for it. And it's the same thing. If you want to find the good, the positive, the uplifting, you can find it if you look for it. If you want to look for the negative and the fearful, you can find that too.
Now, you mentioned another book that you had written prior to your new one that's out right now. Can you tell us a little bit about that one?
Well, that one, is the whole comeback message, and that's such a great message. I mean, it really is. It's a message that I have spoken all over. It's given me opportunities to be interviewed in all kinds of places, because people will always need comebacks, from health setbacks, from relationship setbacks, from financial setbacks, from spiritual setbacks. There will always be setbacks in life. And so we have to learn how to make a comeback, how to move into the comeback. Otherwise, we stay stuck in the setback. And so I wrote a book where I talked about components. First of all, I talk about setbacks, why we have setbacks, and then the one thing that always happens when you go from a setback to a comeback, and then components and steps of a comeback. And then I got into individual chapters on those things I just mentioned: financial, health, relationships. How do you have a comeback, spiritual, in those specific areas?
Okay. Now, financial is a big one as far as any kind of comeback. Even just in general discussion, finances are always at the top of the ladder. So, if a lot of people I know lost their job in the last couple of years, or they had to change jobs and they may not be making as much, how can, what are some of the steps that they can do right now to start towards that comeback?
Well, when you talk about like the financial, like a loss of a job and things like that, there are steps that you can take that are, say, specific to the financial. But I would say that before you can get to the specifics of anything, financial, relationship, divorce, health, there are some other of the steps that are universal that have to happen. And a couple of them that I always talk about and always resonate with people is, the first is dropping the setback mentality, which is where you just keep going over and over in your mind about the loss of the job, the fact that your income is now lower, the fact that you got hit with these extra expenses, and you just keep going over and over and over that. And you've got to shift out of a setback mentality into a comeback mentality. The other, and this is really significant in finances, is you have to exit survival mode. When people have a setback, then they just, and see, this is what's happened in the pandemic too. People dig into, I've got to survive. Well, you know what? You do have to survive a pandemic. You do. You do have to survive it. But here's the thing. At some point, you've got to get out of survival mode and into comeback mode. You got to go from surviving to thriving. And so that there has to be a shift there. And of course, it always begins with your thinking, and then it can move from your thinking to your actions.
Isn't it amazing that thinking, I mean, everything is up here, our fear is up here. It's all in our head, but yet we feel that it's very, very real. I have insomnia from time to time, and it's very difficult. And, when I get into that, even just the thought of it, that fear creeps in. And no matter what verses I quote, no matter how much I pray, that fear is still there trying to conquer my thoughts, and I don't sleep, So it's really hard to get from, so I understand it's hard to get from that fear mentality, that lack of mentality, into, I'm not going to let this bother me. I'm going to make a comeback, and I'm going to be good as ever, better than ever. And I'm going to lay down and go to sleep at night, and I'm not going to get up. That's tough. Yes. So still, can you maybe elaborate a little bit more on that, a step or two on how to change that mindset?
Okay. You just said the key word, change. Change. It's always, no one has ever had a comeback without changing. It is the key to a comeback. And there has to really be a change there has to be three kinds of changes. There has to be a change of heart. There has to be a change of mind. You have to have, and a change of attitude. You've got to think differently. You have to feel differently, and you have to have a different kind of attitude. Those are things that you have to make that powerful choice to simply say, listen, I have a reason for this, but I'm going to think about it different. I'll tell you it's another one of the devotions in the book about worry. If you were to say there was a fog in a city, it covered 7 city blocks, 100 feet high. Huge, dense fog, can't see for 7 city blocks, 100 feet high. It just is completely intimidating. But if you were to take that fog and you were distill it to water, right? Take it from that one form and put it into liquid form, it would fill up 1 glass of water. One glass of water. 100-foot high, 7 blocks long fog is 1 glass of water. So it's those kinds of things. You just have to say, it's a glass. I'll say that to myself. It's just a glass of water. It's just a glass of water. It's intimidating. It's challenging, but it's just a glass of water. And we have to remind ourselves of the good things that have happened, of the blessings that we've had in our lives. This is where gratitude comes in, of how God provides. One of the names for God is that he is the God that sees the need and provides for the need. Right. So God's going to do it. He's going to take care of us. And of course, the great thing about faith, it's like a muscle. The more you work it out, the stronger it gets. A guy like me who started a church from scratch, from like 20 people, and built it to this big church and buildings and facilities and campuses and all that stuff. Incredible stories I could tell you about how we got the land, about how the bankers, 6 bankers turned us down, including one of my good friends, wouldn't even loan us the money to build the building. So you build your faith, Michelle. You build it. And you build it. And then it gets easier. Not easy, but easier to face the fear and overcome it.
Okay. Talk to us a couple of minutes now about meditation, because that was mentioned in the beginning of the show. A lot of people may not understand. Some people think meditation is sitting there with your eyes closed going, and that's not necessarily what it is. Can you describe what meditation is?
Yeah. Well, again, as it applies to This Is Living book, it's the idea that these are meditations, that you read the story, you read the scripture and the application of how you can use it. And then you really just pause and think about, like the scripture I mentioned earlier, that God who's begun a good work in you is going to complete it. That is powerful, to just let that really just sit in your mind, that, just don't rush away from that, but really ponder that and just allow yourself to say, yeah, God is working in me. He's working on me. I'm not what I was before. I'm not what I want to ultimately be, but I'm not what I was before. I've made progress. And just maybe even you think about some of the progress you've made, the changes in your life, and allow yourself to just really ponder and consider. So every devotion has a scripture verse that allows you to pause and meditate on that. So that's one thing. Another is like faith declarations. I don't know if your listeners are familiar with these, or if you are, but can I just read maybe one or two?
Sure.
Yeah. So it would be something like, starting your day saying something like this: I choose faith over fear. I will meditate on what is positive and good about my situation. I will use my energy not to worry, but to believe. Fear has no part in my life. I will not dwell on negative, discouraging thoughts. So you would just say that, just like I just did, that you would make that kind of declaration of faith each day or every day, or here. Maybe here's just one more. Breakthroughs are coming in my life. Sudden burst of God's goodness. Not a trickle, not a stream, but a flood of God's blessings. A flood of healing and wisdom and favor. I choose to be breakthrough minded, that there are breakthroughs that are coming. So it's these, and I could keep going because these are great to say. So you build yourself up in these ways, and this is how you start your day, and you just get yourself in the right mindset. And here's the thing: circumstances may not change, but you will change, and thus you will be different. You will be different. You will think different, and you will feel different.
Yes. A lot of people call those affirmations.
Yes,
And yes,
affirmation.
they are
Correct.
extremely helpful. You have
Mhm.
to stick with them and say them. If you could, Pastor Rick, could you just take a minute and kind of guide the new Christians that might be listening that are still a little lost, but trying to commit? What is it they can do to really grasp all of this?
I think that it always comes down to this idea. In the Bible, it's Lord or Lordship, but that's kind of a hard word to understand. I like the word leadership, and just Jesus is the leader of your life. Follow the leader, follow Jesus. He is the teacher, he is the shepherd, he is the healer. He has the all that we need, he has for us. And so the goal is to draw closer and closer to God through Jesus Christ, God's revelation to us, lived on this earth, knows what we go through because he lived on this earth and understands the challenges and the stresses. He lost friends, he had people pass away, he experienced the things that we experience. So he knows, so you can talk to Jesus about these things, ask for his help, ask for his strength, ask him to, as Thomas said, help my unbelief, like help me to have more faith and than I have now, and he will.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. One last time, tell our readers how to get in touch with you, the name of your book, and where to get your book.
Okay. So again, the best place is just rickmcdaniel.com. So the show that I have, the Daily Devotions with Rick McDaniel on Pray, the podcast comes out every Friday morning. You can listen on everywhere you can, Amazon, Apple, everywhere the podcast is available. And it's called Point of Impact. And each week right now, I am doing some episodes on decision making, how to make wise decisions, good decisions, decisions that will bless your life. Then articles that I've written and other messages that I've done that you can watch on YouTube, all kinds of stuff that has to do with my larger high impact living ministry. And then this book, This is Living.
Okay.
This is Living, daily inspiration to live your faith. So This is Living is my 100 devotions. So like on the back cover, it says 100 inspiring devotions to elevate hope and faith. So easiest thing, just go to Amazon. They'll generally, last time I looked, it was on sale for, like $13 and something. It's a hardcover book. It's fantastic. And so just Rick McDaniel, This is Living, and go to Amazon and you can buy it and have it delivered in no time, and you're on your way. And then the way you do it is that each day has one devotion. So you just start, and it's like, there it is, day one, and you read those 2 pages and you do that and you keep doing that for 100 days and you're just going to have a different mindset. The fear is going to dissipate. The faith is going to grow. You're going to be more positive and less negative. You're going to have much greater hope, and you're going to, circumstances outwardly may not change, but you're going to change on the inside.
Wonderful. Thank you, Pastor Rick, for joining us tonight with our show. We appreciate you.
Good to be with you.
This is Michelle. I just, I hope that you'll pick up his book, start those devotions, and change your life. So this is Michelle Bannister reminding you to start today and live that life you were meant to live.